The tight end position we are breaking down today. The Tennessee Titans or the Tennessee tight ends? Who will be the Titans tight end one? When does Gunnar Helm crack the rotation and how much will he play? How does Josh Whyle fit into all of this? And how many tight ends will the Titans keep this year after they kept 5 on their initial 53-man roster last year? We're breaking down the tight ends today on the Music City Audible. Let's get to it. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Music City Audible podcast, presented by Sinkers Beverages, the premier wine, spirits, and beer store in East Nashville. In partnership with 440 Sports, I'm Justin Graver. Joining me as always, Justin Melo. And today we are continuing our series breaking down every position group on this Titans roster ahead of training camp with our second positional breakdown, looking at the tight ends. How's it going, Justin?
Doing well. Yeah, really interesting group here within the tight ends. A lot of questions. You could scramble up the order, tight end 1 through 3, like with fairly, we can make a fair argument for any of that. So really curious and excited to go through this group with you guys here today.
Yes, if you missed the previous episode yesterday, we covered the safety position in depth, and we're going to follow a similar format today. So if this is new to you, welcome in, and hit that subscribe button, like the video, drop a comment below. Check out the safety episode right after this one. Just open it in a new tab, so YouTube doesn't play it, but you can listen to it as soon as you're done watching this episode if you missed that one. We got 6 tight ends in this group, in this meeting room here, in this position room, and we're going to talk through these guys here. It's Chig Okonkwo, the probably the likely tight end 1 for the Titans, entering the final year of his contract, which we will discuss. Josh Whyle, who I believe is entering his 3rd season with the team, former 5th round pick. Gunnar Helm, the rookie drafted in the 4th round this year, that many people are excited about, especially me, considering that I, like him, am a Texas Longhorn alum. And then there's 3 other names in this mix. David Martin Robinson, who turned some heads last year in the preseason and ended up making the team, who has a lot of people excited. Thomas Odukoya, who was a practice squad guy and is currently a roster exemption as part of the International Pathway Player Program in the NFL. And then Drake Dabney, who has an interesting story simply because he was invited to rookie minicamp this spring on a tryout basis, an undrafted free agent out of TCU, spent 4 years at Baylor and then his final season at TCU. And the Titans signed him to a contract to come. You're good enough to come to training camp is essentially what they said after his rookie minicamp tryout. So does he have a shot to take one of these back end of the roster roles from the tight ends? And we will discuss how many we think they're going to end up keeping this year. But let's start at the top of the depth chart with Chig Okonkwo, who is in a big year for himself because it's a contract year, but also because if he wants to stay in Tennessee or if he wants to get a big contract from someone else, he's got to prove this year that he can be consistent, that he can get off to a good start, which has been a problem for him, which we discussed on the positional rankings episode. So what do you make of Chig Okonkwo's chances this year to cement himself as the Titans tight end 1? And before you answer that, I do want to reference a conversation that was a big talking point last training camp. Was we were asking who is the Titans tight end 1? We were debating between Chig Okonkwo and Josh Whyle.
We were.
And I don't know if that conversation really went anywhere because Josh Whyle didn't have a very notable year, but Chig Okonkwo didn't really either. I mean, he had an okay season. But this year, we're asking the same question, only this time the challenger is Gunnar Helm. And Chig was able to hold off Whyle last season, but can he hold off Gunnar this year?
I feel like Chig has been the same player 2 years in a row, his second and third years. Like as a rookie, he was a day 3 pick. He had temper expectations. He had a great rookie year, like 450 receiving yards, unheard of for a day 3 rookie tight end. We started putting some expectations on him. He comes back as a sophomore. He started really slow. He struggled with drops early on in the year as a second-year player, 2023. He finishes strong, career high, 528 receiving yards. So, okay, comes back in year 3, 2024. We're raising expectations again. It felt like he had the same year, though, right? Like he started really slow. He finished strong. Didn't quite reach, what he did as a sophomore, 479 receiving yards last year. So more than he had as a rookie, less than he had as a sophomore. Again, feels like the last 2 years have been identical to me now. He hasn't played on the greatest offenses. You could say he's been a bit of a victim of the quarterback situation, the offensive line situation. But in all honesty, tight ends like him, they also kind of benefit from chasing the game. And he put up a lot of numbers in garbage time last year. I promise you that. A lot of catches, especially near the end of the year. He went on a tear with receptions. Like if I'm pulling it up right now, actually, because now I'm curious. I've got it right in front of me. Pull up this game log. He had a bunch of games, like the Cincinnati game, they lose 37-27. He had 8 catches. The Colts game, they lose 38-30. He had 9 catches. Like there were a ton of games towards the end of the year where he put up catches when they were chasing. And that Bengals game, they were down bad, right? So like they're chasing the game from behind. 106 total catches the last 2 years. But again, a lot of that was standing at the line of scrimmage and making a catch, right? Or standing at the first down marker, and making a catch when you're down by 21. So
right.
The big year for Chig. He's got to start stronger than he has. He's got to stay consistent throughout the whole year if he's going to secure another contract in Tennessee, or as you said, if he's going to secure a lucrative contract elsewhere, he's got to be a lot more consistent than he's been.
It's a little similar to me to the Amani Hooker conversation that we had yesterday. Amani Hooker, I think, a more established player. Yes. Like, we know what Amani Hooker is. He's a high-level safety in this league. We don't necessarily know what Chig Okonkwo is. But in terms of what the Titans want to do with this pending free agent, what are they going to do with him next year? I think this is another situation where if he has a good enough year to get a lucrative contract on the market, that the Titans might value the comp pick they get for that more than bringing back Okonkwo services, considering they have Josh Whyle still on a rookie contract behind him, and they just drafted Gunnar Helm. And I think the question is, with these tight ends, is who's going to play what role, right? Because last year they had Nick Vannett on the roster, and he was the blocking tight end. And in this group, you can look down the roster. David Martin Robinson is absolutely not that Nick Vannett type. Thomas Odukoya, depends how much they've been able to develop him, but he profiles as a potential that type, but I don't know if he can do that at a high level at all. Drake Dabney was not much of a receiver in college. I think he had like less than 200 receiving yards his final year at TCU. So can he kind of come in and fill that role as a rookie, an undrafted rookie? That would be asking a lot of someone like that. So is Chig Okonkwo, Josh Whyle, or Gunnar Helm equipped to be an inline blocking fullback style tight end on this Titans team that doesn't have a fullback on the roster? Is one of those guys going to do it? And is that going to carve out a roster spot and a role for them? I think I know what you're going to answer this question with.
Yeah, I want to talk about the roles in general. I'm going to backpedal just slightly, and maybe we're all a little too down on Chig. Like, as excited as I am about Gunnar Helm, and I'm ready to talk about him, I think it'd be fair to say Chig is probably still the primary pass catcher in this group this coming season. Like, again, Gunnar Helm, year 1, rookie, like Chig fairly established going into year 4, 450 plus receiving yards every year he's been in the league. And there's opportunity for him here. I want to quickly just mention, he's got Cam Ward as his quarterback now, a guy who loved targeting the middle of the field, especially at Miami this past year. He had a phenomenal tight end in Elijah Arroyo there, who went top 50 in the draft, was drafted way higher than any of the Miami receivers, who none of which actually got drafted, I don't think. They were all
right.
UDFA. So Arroyo goes top 50. We know Cam Ward loves the middle of the field. Like, this is up to Chig to take this opportunity. As excited as we are about the receiver room in terms of what it could be, like, we don't know what Alec Iomanner, Xavier Restrepo, Shimere DK, Tyler Lockett in the twilight years of his career. There's a path for Chig to be the second most targeted Titans pass catcher on the offense this year. Now, I don't know that that's going to happen, and I'm not ready to say that with any sense of confidence. But the point is, there's a pathway that you could create to that happening, and it's up to Chig to create that pathway, right? By being consistent, by developing chemistry with Cam Ward at training camp, by showing him he's a reliable target in that middle area of the field that we know Cam Ward loves targeting. So that's what it comes down to Chig, to establish himself as the primary pass catcher and one of Cam Ward's favorites. The second part of your question, or maybe the first part, I created what I just said, but the first part of your question regarding the blocking tight end, I'm not a gambling man. If I had to put money on it, I still think it's probably Josh Whyle. Like, I think when he was coming out of Cincinnati, that was what they sort of saw him doing. Maybe a bit more dual threat than Chig is, because I do think he's got a little pass catching upside, and you've only seen that in spurts. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. He's had multiple concussions, which has sort of stunted his growth. But if I had to guess right now, I think Josh Whyle is the best blocking tight end. And we're going to get to talk about Gunnar Helm in a second. If I was talking about Gunnar Helm in that realm from a blocking role, I would say he's like probably in between. He's probably better than Chig was as a rookie, and he's better suited in general to do it because he's got significantly more size than Okonkwo does. but I don't think I'm ready. Like, he hasn't played yet, and having I watched the tape at Texas, he was a little inconsistent. Like, I'm not ready to put him on the Josh Whyle pedestal in terms of inline blocking.
So I think that there is a misconception around Gunnar Helm, because Gunnar Helm was at Texas for many years. I know what you're going to say,
and I think you're right.
So Gunnar Helm played behind Jatavion Sanders for, I think, the first 3 years of his career in Texas, or maybe the first 2, because I don't know how long Sanders was there. I should know this better, but I don't. So the point is, Gunnar Helm only started as the premier pass-catching tight end for the Texas Longhorns for 1 season because he was stuck behind a guy who was a second-round pick the year before until he got his shot. And so Gunnar Helm actually was the blocking tight end for the Texas Longhorns for most of his career there. And then last season, they expand his role. I believe the coaches came to him in the offseason and said, we need you to step up. This is your year to be that guy in the passing game for us, and we need you to take that challenge and run with it. And he did, to the tune of breaking the Texas Longhorns single season records by a tight end for catches and receiving yards. So he stepped up in a massive way and proved that he could be a big-time threat as a pass catcher. But before
he led
that,
the offense in receptions this past year when they had a first-round wide receiver in Matthew Golden.
No, that's a great point. And part of that is because Matthew Golden came on midway through the year when Isaiah Bond sort of disappeared from the offense and was dealing with an ankle injury and kind of just disappeared. And then Matthew Golden became that primary guy. And I think if Golden had had that role the whole season, he probably leads the team in receiving yards or receptions or whatever stat you mentioned. And it's still a first round pick. But still, no, that's nothing against what Gunnar Helm did as a pass catcher this past season. So we know he's a threat that way. And I think because we saw him do that last year, we forget that this guy was the run blocking tight end in the Texas Longhorns offense that went to the college football semifinal the season before last, as well as last season. And he was that engine in the run game. And he has talked about this. I think it was after one of the practices early on, maybe it was at rookie minicamp, or talking about his blocking. And he's like, look, I know my blocking last year wasn't up to par. He said it was a down year for me, but I go back to the 3 years of tape from before that, where that's all I basically did in the offense was run block. And he's like, I know I can block, and I know I can block at a higher level than I did last season. And obviously the NFL is a different beast than blocking in college. But I say all that to say that I think Gunnar Helm could be one of the premier two-way tight ends in the NFL if he, continues to develop and reaches his ceiling. And I don't know how long that's going to take, but he's a guy that can be, I don't want to compare him to the all-time greats by any stretch, but in the mold of, in terms of how he's used, a Gronkowski, a George Kittle, a guy who you can rely on to be that point of attack run blocker, who leading the way for your running back, who then can, on play action, line up in the same spot and then go out and sell a blocking fake that turns into a route that, he's beating a linebacker or a safety one-on-one in the receiving game too. So I think that Gunnar Helm has a very high ceiling. I know athletically he didn't test great, and he ran like a 4.8 40 at the combine, which was largely due to running it on a sprained ankle, which I look at as this tough son of a bitch ran the 40 with a sprained ankle. He posted a picture of it afterward. It looked like someone shoved a softball into his leg at the joint of his foot and his calf. So tough son of a bitch who is going to be dependable and reliable, and I think can play as a blocker in line or as a pass catcher. And that versatility this season is going to be really big for the Titans offense, because you never know what his role is going to be when he's on the field. But then projecting ahead, I do think that there is a better than not chance that this is Chig Okonkwo's last year in Tennessee, because Gunnar Helm will be able to take that mantle as the primary pass catcher who can block and who can play in 2 tight end sets with Josh Whyle looking beyond this season, and play in those 2 tight end sets with Chig Okonkwo this season, and be as good of a blocker potentially as Josh Whyle, to the point where Josh Whyle is your 3rd tight end who rarely plays. Like, I think that's a likely outcome for this offense. Maybe not week 1, but by mid-season, that Chig and Gunnar are getting the lion's share of all the tight end snaps.
Well, you hope that's the case, right? Because they're the 2 most talented tight ends in the room. I'm going to read you a quick excerpt from a piece we published on Titan Size about a week ago now. The headline is, Gunnar Helm's tape is already forcing questions about the Titans' tight end plan. This is a film breakdown piece by Drew Beatty. If you're not familiar with Drew, he's a rising star in the Titans Twitter realm. His handle's at Iron City Film. You should be following him. I'm thrilled to have him doing film breakdown pieces at Titan Size. I love kind of showcasing the other side of the argument because he'll go against you a little bit here. This is really interesting to me. And again, this is just his assessment, not saying it's the end all be all, but despite spending most of the draft cycle talked about as a traditional inline Y, the more realistic scenario is that Helm eventually inherits the F role currently taken by Okonkwo. While he does bring more power than Chig, he still struggles to survive as a true inline run blocker. Despite flashes of success, his lack of overall play strength, inconsistent hand placement, and leverage issues could prevent him from taking over a full-time Y role. Just one guy's assessment, a smart guy's assessment based on the film this past year. And it is a bit in line with what Helm said. Say, hey, last year was not up to par for me as a run blocker. I knew it wasn't my best year in that area. Maybe he was focusing too much on being the pass catching threat that he needed to be, in truth, to elevate his draft stock. Very important, right? So, but I am intrigued. Look, Chig is what, 6'2", 240? Helm is like 6'5", 250-ish, I believe. Like, no doubt he's better suited to play a blocking role than Chig is, and will do so more frequently. The question is, how well does he do it to take that role from another specialized player on the roster? But for me, I'm really excited about what Gunnar Helm brings specifically as a pass catcher, and I do think you're right. He could take the mantle from Chig as the tight end one, as the primary pass catcher. Maybe the deeper question is, can he be that real, George Kittle dual threat primary blocker as well?
Yeah, that is a question. It's no doubt it's a question. He's got to work on the technique, but I am, encouraged by the fact that Bill Callahan is coaching the offensive line and therefore helping the tight ends with their blocking technique, and that Luke Stalker is the tight ends coach, and this was his role when he played in the league, was to be the inline blocker guy. Let's talk about the other guys at this position, because we've touched on Josh Whyle, but not really. And I did ask in the intro, how does Josh Whyle fit into the equation? Because Josh Whyle could be the primary blocker, but then you might struggle to get Chig Okonkwo and Gunnar Helm both on the field. And obviously it depends on how quickly Gunnar Helm proves that he can hack it at the NFL level. But if you want to get both those guys on the field, there's not a lot of snaps left for Josh Whyle. So how do you see his role playing out this season?
Look, I think there's a slight chance that Josh Whyle doesn't make this roster. Now, I'm not comfortable saying, projecting that or even predicting it. I have Whyle on my 53-man roster, and the best pathway for that to come to fruition is that he's the primary blocking tight end. Now, you talked about, well, how do you get them all on the field? Look, I'd be stunned if Gunnar Helm is a good enough blocker to be the full-time special blocker every single time they want that on the field. Yeah, I think it's more likely that Whyle is that. Helm is that a little bit occasionally, but that it's Whyle, and then maybe Helm and Chig kind of split snaps for the pass-catching role kind of thing. But I guess I probably said that a little sloppily, but what I mean to say is I could see Helm only eating into Wiley's blocking snaps a little bit, while also eating into Chig's pass-catching snaps a little bit, right? So everyone kind of gets divvied up, three ways, if you will. But for Whyle to make this team, he's got to be the primary blocker, and he's got to be the best one on the team. Because if he's not as good of a blocker as Chig, or if he's not as good of a blocker as Gunnar Helm, you start to lose sight of the argument on why he should be on the team at all. Now, again, I do think he's the best blocker on the 53-man roster once it comes out. But yeah, there's a pathway for a Thomas Odukoya or a Drake Dabney, probably not, or a David Martin Robinson to make this team ahead of him.
Yeah, so let's talk about those three guys, because you have, I referenced this yesterday on the safety episode that I was looking at your 53-man roster projection from a few weeks ago now, and I'm looking at it again for tight ends. You got 3 tight ends making the roster, which means you have Josh Whyle making it. So you don't have David Martin Robinson, Thomas Odukoya, or Drake Dabney making this final team. And that's where I'm at too. And I know there's going to be people, we referenced this when we did the positional power rankings that, the F Words crew, Stoney and Zach I think they had David Martin Robinson making the team over Josh Whyle. And I wouldn't go that far. And I mean, we're all excited for the potential upside that he could bring. And if that's the case, stash him on the practice squad. And if somebody gets hurt, you call him up. And I think that's his role. And Thomas Odukoya is still not counting against the roster, so you might as well keep him around and see if he can develop into something. But ultimately, you have draft capital invested in Chig Okonkwo, Josh Whyle, and Gunnar Helm. And whether or not Chig's on the team next year, You still get Gunnar Helm and Josh Whyle on day 3 contracts, that to the point where like you're not supplanting them for an undrafted free agent unless they really force your hand. Like unless Whyle really struggles and Drake Dabney just comes in as like, I should have been drafted and shows why. Like I have a hard time seeing how one of these other 3 guys actually ends up making this team.
Same. To close out this conversation, I'll say this: as exciting as it was to, DMR, David Martin Robinson last year, training camp, preseason, keeping him on the 53 proved to be a mistake. Like keeping 53 tight ends. They almost kept 53. Keeping 5 tight ends was stupid. It showed up every week on special teams when they had 1 or 2 tight ends inactive and they didn't have enough help on special teams. They're going to course correct that in a major way this year. I'll be shocked if they even keep 4 tight ends. I think it's going to be 3. With DMR being a primary pass catcher, it's really hard to see how he replaces any of those guys. You're not good enough at blocking tight end if you have Chig, Helm, and DMR as your 3 tight ends. You're just not. So that's why I think Whyle makes the roster. With Okonkwo, like I would almost say there's an easier pathway to him making the roster over DMR, but the catch there is the exemption. Like, why use a 53-man roster spot on him if you still have the exemption? You might as well keep him on the practice squad. He's a really good blocker, in my opinion, but we're talking about roster and asset management, right? I can keep both if I keep Whyle on my 53 and I keep Okonkwo on my practice squad. And then in relation to DMR, I'll say quickly, people always overrate the chances that a guy's going to get claimed. Do the math. 90 guys down to 53. How many get cut a year? Okay, a ton of guys get cut. There's like 10 waiver claims submitted at the end of cut down day. That's not going to be David Martin Robinson. You can stash him on the practice squad. Drake Dabney, not a whole lot to say. He's by far the biggest long shot of any of these guys. If they think he could develop into a high-level blocker, and they might think that based on what he did in college and the fact that they've brought him in, he's a practice squad stash.
Yeah, I think Drake Dabney obviously I think it's twofold. Drake Dabney has the longest shot to make the roster, but also the easiest path if he's good. And we don't know hardly anything about this guy because we didn't scout this undrafted free agent that the Titans didn't even...
Too similar to Okonkwo, right? But again, you've got
we don't know.
Yeah.
Yes, and we don't really know. And yes, because of the exemption with Okonkwo, like Drake Dabney is the only guy on this list, in my opinion, of these 3 guys that we have off the roster who could take Josh Whyle's spot, because he just, like, if that's what he is, if he is a high-level blocking tight end that you found, like... We don't know anything about him, so I just don't want to write him off because we don't know anything about him, and I'm acknowledging that we got to see it, obviously. But if I was, putting money on which tight ends make the roster, I am not hesitating to say it's Chig, Gunnar, and Josh Whyle, and we'll see if that actually plays out. But I think I'm with you in that they don't keep 5 tight ends again. I also don't think they keep 4 tight ends. I think these are the 3 guys, and I think they're all going to play a decent amount, and then it'll just be about seeing as the season progresses, is Gunnar Helm getting more and more snaps, and whose snap load is decreasing? Because I could see them, riding Chig out as this primary starting pass-catching tight end and then letting him walk and sort of being like, we have the succession plan in place. But I could also see them just enacting that succession plan midway through the season if they feel like it gives them the best chance to win.
I'll say this. I'll close out on this note. 3 tight ends on the roster, and they've got a perfect blend of skill sets to keep the specific 3, right? Like, if I had to summarize in 10 seconds or less, Chig is a pass catcher, Josh Whyle is a blocker, and Gunnar Helm is both. That's a great way to have 3. That's a great way to divide your tight end room between 3 different players.
Yeah, I agree. And Josh Whyley's got to be that. I mean, he's got to be Nick Van Nett.
He's got to be healthy.
And he's got to be healthy. He's got to keep the Guardian cap on, Josh. We need you to be healthy. So there you go. That is the tight end position group here. We have done 2 down now. Tomorrow we will hit the cornerbacks. So come back tomorrow. We'll break down the cornerback group. A lot of names. Too many names in this group. We're going to go through them. A lot of undrafted free agents. Who's got the best chance to make the roster out of all those guys, and Marcus Harris included? We will discuss that on tomorrow's episode. So thanks to everyone for tuning in. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Give this video a thumbs up, like, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Pick 3 tight ends that make the roster. Pick 3, put them in the comments. Let us know your thoughts. And thanks again to Sinkers Beverages. Remember to check out the Sinkers 40th Birthday Jamboree. The link to get your tickets is in the podcast description. All right, that'll do it until tomorrow, Justin. We're going to keep rolling through these position previews. It's a lot of podcasting for us, but it's good for us and for you. So until tomorrow, y'all stay safe out there and tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.